So the President of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, recently addressed his National Executive Council. And this is what a whole president of a country, a man who's been in charge for 8 years of a country, had to say. He said that the South African economy is in a state of emergency. Right? This is as if he's been some kind of bystander and, just immigrated to South Africa or something. It's the first time that it's dawned on our president that there's something wrong with the economy. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it's unemployment getting to 50%. Maybe it's, who knows how this guy finally reached this conclusion that many of us had reached many years ago. But anyway, it finally dawned on President Ramaphosa that the South African economy is in a state of emergency. Well, I've got to say one thing. Let's say he's very good at diagnosing the problem, but not so good at diagnosing the solution, because, he comes out with the usual diatribe about South Africa needing inclusive growth and all these other fancy things. Let's help him out here. I mean, he's our president after all. We want the country to succeed. So let's just help him out with some solutions. Because the real problem is that we're in a state of emergency. And who's going to break the news to him that it's actually his fault? So let's explain what the problems with the South African economy are. First of all, we have suddenly been caught in a whirlwind of international relations. Geopolitics, as we like to call it. And that is that South Africa has basically sided with the bad guys, depending on your standpoint. We've made friends with Iran and Russia and China. And that's fine. We're entitled to make friends with whoever we like. But there's economic implications of these friendships. Let's first deal with our friendship with China, which I actually think is a good friendship. Why? China remains the world's largest manufacturer, and we do a lot of trade with China. We send them raw materials. Somebody's got to take it. They send us finished goods. In other words, we'll send them stuff. They've got the workers and the factories that'll turn it into things that we want. They send it back to us. Net on net, we import more from China than we export to China. They are an important client of South Africa, an important partner, but please understand that from an economic perspective, we're helping the Chinese economy a lot more than they're helping ours. China is a manufacturing economy. They don't really want to set up a plant in South Africa. They want to set up more plants in China. So they're not about to help us with our unemployment crisis. They're also the economic miracle, without question, of the 21st century, the economic miracle by far. But they're a fairly new economy. They've dragged hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And that's all very good. But they're not a mature economy, which means that they don't have a lot of investment money, knocking about. And most of their investment money has been used to invest in their own economy, which is what would happen if South Africa were to grow. You'd want South Africa to grow, and you'd want all of that investment money, all of those retirement policies, insurance policies, to go towards building the South African economy. That's what the Chinese economy does. It takes all of its money, it invests it in China. Right. So in other words, China is unlikely to buy South African bonds or to lend South Africa money. Right? They need it for themselves. And that's understandable. That's just economics 101. Will China help us with some of our big infrastructure projects? With the bloody, like a flash, they'll be here to help us with whatever they want. We want a port built. China will come and build it with us. But as we've seen from China's other actions where they've built a lot of stuff, they do two things. They'll insist that the workers that come along come from China because they understand Chinese workers, they don't have a communication problem, they don't have a labor issue, they don't have any of that. So they'll come along and they'll build these infrastructure projects, but they'll manage it with their own people. They'll get it done on time and on budget. And if we want to do it as some kind of a loan, that's fine by China as well. But they'd want collateral. And usually the collateral, we don't have money to put down, otherwise we'd build it ourselves. So the collateral will be in the form of the thing that they're building. So if they're building a port, they'll say, fine, if you renege on your payments, if you don't make the payments, we'll take over and we'll own the port. And they've already done this in places like Sri Lanka, Zambia. There's many examples of where China has dealt with irresponsible countries in the third world that didn't pay back the money, and then they've just taken over that particular facility as it was in the contract. So China, great partner, but understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a young country that's growing. Its economy doesn't really want to give us money. So they're not going to solve our economic problem here in a hurry. Some of our other partners, well, we understand that some of our people, some of the comrades feel permanently indebted to the Soviet Union for the help in the struggle. Well, here's news for them. The Soviet Union was a collection of countries. Many countries formed the Union. It wasn't just Russia. Russia was just the biggest of the countries, but it wasn't only Russia. But for some reason, and I've got a feeling, backroom deals, etc., we support Russia. But this is talking about the economy. Now, Russia would be a great place if we want them to send men with guns. But they're not a great place if we're looking for help on the economic side. In actual fact, the Russian economy is a fairly lousy economy. They rely on oil, and they rely on arms and ammunition. They never quite cracked production and manufacture. You remember the jokes about Soviet Union Lada cars that were terrible. Couldn't wait to get rid of them. Okay, and you've never quite seen a wonderful washing machine or microwave oven that comes out of Russia. They don't get it. And besides, their economy is run by oligarchs. Much like South Africa's economy is run by a couple of very rich people. What do they tend to do, those oligarchs? They tend to take their money, put it in tax havens, and buy football teams in England. They're not going to buy South African bonds or invest in the South African economy. If you need help with your military coup, phone the Russians. They'll help you. If you need help creating a new factory, don't phone the Russians. Iran. Iran is quite a new relationship for South Africa, and in many ways a strange relationship. Up until the Ayatollahs took over, which was around 1979, the old Iranian regime used to trade with apartheid South Africa. They used to sell us oil, even when the rest of the world wasn't selling us oil. They used to buy arms from South Africa. Right? So it's not like Iran were helping us in the struggle. By the time the Ayatollahs took over, they had their own problems to solve. They weren't rushing out to send troops or to help South Africa in the struggle. So this idea that Iran was some kind of struggle ally is not true. But Iran needs friends because it tends to deal only in enemies, and they like failed states. If you look at where Iran has got involved, country like Yemen, failed state. Country like Syria, when it was a failed state. Now that Syria's on the road to recovery, Iran's out. Palestine, failed state. They like to get into these places that are failed states so that they can foment rebellion, war, and misery. They're not going to build a big industrial plant. They're not going to make computer games. That's not what Iran does. So perhaps we're making the wrong friends if we're looking for economic help. What kind of economic help could we be looking for? Well, let's try mature, rich economies that are fully developed, that are looking for places to develop and to create some wealth for themselves, because they can no longer build more manufacturing plants. And there you're looking at the first world, as we call it now, the West, Europe and the US. Those are the places with extra money. Those are the people that are prepared to invest in places like South Africa. But they're kind of picky as to what company we keep. So if we're looking for a bit of short-term investment, the West is the only place in town. So that's talking about our friends. Now let's talk about what President Ramaphosa how he could deal with his economic state of emergency. Let's try our policies. Right? Now, our policies are pretty crazy when it comes to the economy. Pretty crazy. They are policies that are best suited to Switzerland, not to South Africa. Understand this, that if we want to unlock the value of South Africa, we need the black middle class to build businesses, not to get a slug of other businesses. We need more businesses, not different ownership of the ones we've got. We need to somehow encourage the development of other products and businesses, manufacturing plants, etc. Right? You are not helping the economy if you give 30% of an existing company to a different shareholder. They are not going to behave differently to the previous shareholder. You're not going to get jobs there. You're not going to get growth there. You're going to get the same company with just a different guy sitting in the corner office. So our BEE policies, which is a massive impediment to foreign investment, needs to be rethought. Okay, it needs to go. We need to stop telling black people that they're not good enough to start their own businesses, because I believe that they are good enough to start their own businesses, right? And let them start businesses. The more we keep on with BEE, the more existing companies will take the best black talent and employ them, instead of that best black talent starting their own businesses. The more the government keeps on employing the best black graduates, those people will not go into the private sector to run more and new and exciting companies. We have to get more export focused. We've got to make stuff that we can send overseas. This goes without saying. But you can't send stuff overseas if the ports don't work, if the trains don't run. How do you ever export? So we can't do that. So it's these policies that are a killer. On top of that, the biggest problem that we have with our policies, has been said so many times, is we have a very, very bloated public sector. We try and do too many things. Our guys in government, there's just too many of them. They're trying to manage everything, stuff that they shouldn't manage. I mean, have you ever stopped to consider why the government feels that they should be managing sport by having a department of sports, arts and culture? These things are best served in the private sector by people that can run these things best. What on earth have we got a whole ministry doing? What for? We've seen the drama that has come with the Ministry of Higher Education. I mean, my Lord, even our president had to fire that minister. Why? Because there's no real constructive job that the Ministry of Higher Education does. Therefore, it becomes a hotbed for corruption through the CETAs, for example, where we waste over 20 billion rand a year, plus more, in keeping something there that never used to exist and doesn't need to exist. Our policies are made for developed countries. Many of our laws that we've taken onto our books come from places like Canada and Australia, developed countries, not suitable for South Africa. So our policies are problematic, very, very, very problematic. We need to get government out of our lives, right? Smaller government, less regulation, let the economy, take it off the leash, let the economy grow. And then we've got the third part of the problem, and that is the government itself. The government's role is to create a country so that the rest of us can run businesses, create wealth, and live a good life. But you can't do that if the power is out. You can't do that if the trains don't run or the ports aren't working. If there's potholes in the street. This is the job of a government. Safety and security. The legal system. That is the only job of government. is to create the infrastructure so that the rest of us can work and do what we need to do. Nothing else. So what should the government do? Well, for starters, we've got a massive crisis when it comes to electricity. Right now, the lights are staying on only just. But please understand that we could not have growth in this economy with the power infrastructure we've got. We do not have enough electricity to keep the lights on if the economy grows. That should be everything that the government's worrying about, is keeping the lights on if the economy grows. We say we want economic growth. Well, we can't handle economic growth. We say we want manufacturing. It doesn't help having manufacturing if there are no ports and no trains to get the stuff to go to where it needs to go to. The government's got to do its job. Safety and security. People need to feel safe. They need to see that there's a future in the country. Not that I could die today. You don't want to have another one of those conversations where people say, you know, my house was broken into, and the next person says, well, at least they didn't kill you. That is not a way to live a life. Right? The street lights must work. The roads, you should be able to drive the roads without falling into a pothole. That's the job of government. Not to try and fix the problems in the Middle East. Fix the problems on the East Rand. That is really the job of government. If this president of ours is serious and South Africa is in an economic state of emergency, then deal with it. Focus here. Focus on fixing the problems here that stop our businesses from growing. But instead, we worried about international affairs where South Africa is a joke. So if we truly have moved to the point where miraculously our president has realized that 50% unemployment is not such a good look, then do something about it and do the right thing. And the right thing is common sense business policies. Right partners, right policies, and the government must do what it needs to do, and that's all. If we had to do this, South Africa would be a rich place, and we wouldn't have the problems that we sit with to this very day. Government is in the way. Let's get them out of the way. Please pass this message on. Wouldn't it be great if somebody from government could actually listen to this? So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe to the State of the Nation. I'm going to go before I have a heart attack. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you again on the State of the Nation.